Your skirt's too long for a real woman, sweetheart."
The words sliced through the morning hallway like a blade through silk. Robert Kane's massive hand gripped the hem of Sarah Mitchell's navy blue skirt, his knuckles white with intent. Around them, the fluorescent lights of Adams County Vocational Institute cast harsh shadows on linoleum that had seen 30 years of scuffed shoes and broken dreams. Sarah's Apple Watch vibrated against her wrist, 152 beats per minute. Her body knew what her mind was still processing. This was the moment everything would change. The fabric lifted. 8 inches. 10. The cool hallway air hit her thighs as Robert's laugh echoed off the walls. Behind him, 4 other male teachers formed a semicircle of sneering faces. James Porter, from Automotive Technology, his wedding ring catching the light. William Cross, from Business Studies, coffee cup steaming in his hand. Daniel Shaw, from IT, phone already half raised. Richard Dunn, from Campus Security, the man supposedly there to protect everyone. "Please," Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. Her hands shot down, trying to push the skirt back into place, but Robert's grip was iron. "Let go." "What's wrong, Boston girl?" William's voice dripped condescension. "Not how they do things in your fancy East Coast schools." 23 students had stopped in the hallway. Some stared. Some looked away. 3 had their phones out, and Sarah could see the red recording lights blinking like tiny accusations. Her legs trembled, not from fear but from the effort of staying upright when every instinct screamed to run. Then came the sound of tearing fabric. 3 inches of hem, separating from the skirt's body with a soft rip that might as well have been thunder. "Oh shit," James laughed. "Looks like you need a new wardrobe anyway." T-minus 72 hours. That's what the FBI handler had said during their last secure call. 72 hours until the emergency board hearing that would either expose $3.2 million in embezzled federal training funds or bury the truth forever. Sarah had thought she could handle 3 more days of maintaining her cover as a shy, newly hired accounting teacher. She hadn't anticipated this. Robert's other hand reached forward, and Sarah's body moved on instinct. Her nails raked across his forearm as she pulled back, leaving 4 distinct red lines. He cursed and released the skirt, which fell back down, torn, wrinkled, but covering her again. "You little, is there a problem here?" The voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Rebecca Thompson, the school nurse everyone called Becky, appeared with an emergency blanket and a medical kit. Her strawberry blonde hair was pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd worn every day for 3 years. But something in her gray eyes made Robert step back. "Just having some fun with the new girl," Robert said, flexing his scratched arm. "She needs to learn how to take a joke." Becky's gaze swept over the scene with clinical precision. The torn skirt, the red marks already rising on Sarah's thigh where Robert's rings had pressed too hard. The circle of men, the watching students, the phone still recording. "That's sexual assault," Becky said clearly, loudly enough for every phone to pick up. "I'm documenting everything." She wrapped the blanket around Sarah's shoulders, then did something odd. She pulled on purple nitrile gloves with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. Not the loose food service gloves the cafeteria used, but medical-grade examination gloves that snapped at the wrists. "Come on, hun," Becky said to Sarah, but her eyes never left Robert's scratched arm. "Let's get you to the medical room." As they walked away, Sarah heard Patricia Henderson's voice echoing down the hallway. The principal had arrived, her heels clicking against the floor in that particular rhythm everyone recognized. "Gentlemen, please see me after your morning classes." "Robert, that was inappropriate." The tone was all wrong. Too light, too casual, like she was addressing a spilled coffee rather than what had just happened. If you believe workplace harassment needs real consequences, hit that like button and subscribe right now. And yes, please hit the thanks button to support stories that expose the truth about what happens when people think no one's watching. By the way, Becky just sealed something in a small evidence bag while Patricia was talking. Did you catch what it was? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Does this kind of thing happen in your country too? Because Sarah's story is about to reveal something that happens in schools across America every single day. The medical room smelled like rubbing alcohol and the faint vanilla of the candle Becky kept on her desk for stress relief. Sarah sat on the examination table, paper crinkling beneath her. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I need to photograph the injuries," Becky said, pulling out not a phone, but an actual camera. "Is that okay?" Sarah nodded, then watched as Becky placed a forensic measurement ruler next to each red mark on her thigh. Click, adjust angle. Click, move the ruler. Click. Each photograph was methodical, precise, like evidence being catalogued for something much bigger than a workplace incident report. "How long have you been at Adams County?" Sarah asked, trying to distract herself from the humiliation burning in her chest. 3 years, Becky replied, now using cotton swabs to collect something from under Sarah's fingernails. "Transferred here from Baltimore. Before that, I worked at Johns Hopkins." "That's a prestigious hospital. Why leave for a vocational school?" Becky sealed the swab in a small tube, labeled it with permanent marker, then looked directly at Sarah. "Sometimes the most important work happens in the least expected places." She pulled out a blood pressure cuff, wrapped it around Sarah's arm, and began pumping. The squeeze was almost comforting, something normal in a morning that had spiraled into chaos. Sarah's Apple Watch still showed elevated heart rate, 138 beats per minute now, slowly declining. "Your cortisol levels are probably through the roof," Becky said, making notes on a form that looked far more detailed than a standard school medical report. "I'm going to recommend blood work. There's a pattern we need to document." "Pattern?" "This isn't the first time Robert Kane has done this. Won't be the last either, unless someone stops him." The door opened without a knock. Patricia Henderson stood in the doorway, her navy suit impeccable, her smile practiced. At 52, she had the kind of authority that came from 2 decades of controlling every aspect of Adams County Vocational Institute. "Sarah, how are you feeling? I'm so sorry about that unfortunate incident." "Unfortunate. Like it was weather, not assault." "I'm documenting injuries consistent with sexual battery," Becky said, not looking up from her forms. "The photographs will be part of the official record." "Now, let's not blow this out of proportion," Patricia said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "Boys will be boys, especially Robert. He's passionate about maintaining standards. Perhaps your attire was a bit provocative." Sarah's skirt had been knee-length, conservative by any measure. But she bit her tongue, remembering her handler's words. Let them incriminate themselves. Every word matters. "I'll need copies of those photos for Robert's personnel file," Patricia continued. "We'll handle this internally, of course. No need to involve outside authorities." "Protocol requires me to maintain chain of custody," Becky replied, placing the camera in a locked drawer. "The evidence stays with medical." Patricia's smile tightened. "We'll discuss this later, Rebecca. Sarah, take the day off if you need to, but I trust you'll be professional about this situation. We wouldn't want your probationary period to be affected by any misunderstandings about our school culture." The threat was subtle but clear. Play along or lose your job. After Patricia left, Becky continued her documentation in silence for several minutes. Then, she pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a text message that had just arrived. Package confirmed. Maintain cover. Help is coming. "You're not really a nurse, are you?" Sarah whispered. "I'm absolutely a nurse," Becky replied. "Fully licensed in Maryland and Pennsylvania. Board certified in emergency medicine. But before that, I spent 12 years as a forensic nurse examiner with the FBI. Specialized in documenting evidence that holds up in federal court." The pieces clicked into place. The gloves, the photography technique, the chain of custody procedures. "They stationed you here before I arrived. 18 months ago. We knew something was wrong with the federal training grant allocations, but we needed someone inside the financial system to trace the money. You're the key, Sarah. But after what happened today—" Becky paused, checking that the door was fully closed. "Robert Kane isn't just a predator. He's protecting something bigger." She pulled up a file on her phone, shielding it from any potential cameras. A mugshot from 2019 appeared. The man looked different. Shorter hair, no beard, but the scar on his neck was unmistakable. Michael Torres, wanted for 3 counts of sexual assault in Philadelphia. Disappeared 5 years ago. Look familiar? Sarah studied the image. The eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. But it was the scar that confirmed it. A distinctive curved line from a bar fight, according to the file. Robert Kane is Michael Torres? We think so, but we need DNA to confirm, and he's been careful. Until today. Becky held up the sealed tube with the swab from under Sarah's fingernails. You scratched him. His DNA is under your nails. This is the break we've been waiting for. The Apple Watch buzzed again, a calendar reminder Sarah didn't remember setting. Staff meeting, 2:00 p.m., mandatory. That's not a regular meeting, Becky said, reading her own phone. Patricia just called an emergency session. She's going to try to control the narrative before those student videos spread. 23 witnesses. At least 6 were recording. And by lunch, it'll be on social media. Patricia can't contain this like she has before. Becky stood, locking the medical drawer with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. But Sarah, you need to understand something. This goes deeper than Robert or even Patricia. The money you've been tracking, the $3.2 million in missing federal funds, it's connected to a network that infiltrates half the vocational schools in the tri-state area. Sarah felt her world tilt. She'd come here to investigate simple embezzlement. This was organized crime. Who else knows? On our side? One other person in this building. But I can't reveal who yet. They're too deep in Patricia's inner circle. If their cover is blown, we lose everything. A knock on the door made both women freeze. Then a voice, soft and concerned. Becky? It's Nicole Bradley. May I come in? The vice principal. Nicole had been at Adams County for 5 years, Patricia's right hand in everything, from budget meetings to staff discipline. If she was here, Patricia had sent her. Becky opened the door carefully. Nicole stood in the hallway, her expression unreadable. At 44, she had the kind of quiet authority that made students confess to things they hadn't even done wrong. Patricia sent me to check on the situation, Nicole said, then stepped inside and closed the door. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But that's not why I'm here. She pulled out her phone and showed them a video. It was from the hallway, but from an angle neither Sarah nor Becky had noticed. It showed everything. Robert pulling the skirt, the other men laughing, Sarah's desperate attempt to cover herself, the fabric tearing. Daniel Shaw thinks he deleted all the student videos from the cloud server, Nicole said. He doesn't know I mirror everything to a backup he can't access. Sarah and Becky exchanged glances. Was Nicole the other agent, or was this a trap? "Why are you showing us this?" Becky asked carefully. "Because in about 6 hours, Patricia is going to gather those 5 men and create a unified story that makes Sarah look like she instigated the whole thing. They'll say she's been flirting with Robert, that she wanted attention, that she's trying to manipulate her way through her probationary period." Nicole's jaw tightened. "I've watched her do it 3 times before. 3 other women who tried to report harassment. Their complaints disappeared, their reputations were destroyed, and they all left within a month. And you let it happen?" Sarah couldn't keep the accusation out of her voice. "I documented everything, every incident, every cover-up, every payment from the discretionary fund to silence victims." Nicole pulled a flash drive from her pocket. 5 years of evidence. But I needed something big enough that Patricia couldn't bury it. Today might be that day. The drive was small, black, unremarkable. But Sarah could feel its weight, like it was made of lead. What's on it? Financial records showing Patricia authorizes hazard pay bonuses to the 5 men after every incident. Emails where she coordinates their stories. Audio recordings of her threatening previous victims. And something else. Proof that Robert Kane has been using a false identity. Becky reached for the drive, then stopped. If you've had this for 5 years, why wait? Because Patricia has connections everywhere. The school board, the police department, the mayor's office. She's untouchable at the local level. I needed federal involvement. Nicole looked directly at Sarah. "I know who you really are. Both of you. I've known for months." The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. "The FBI approached me a year ago," Nicole continued. "Asked me to stay in position, keep gathering evidence. They said they were sending in specialists who could build a case that would stick. A forensic nurse who could document physical evidence. A financial analyst who could trace the money. They told me to wait, to watch, to be ready." She handed the drive to Becky. "The 2 o'clock meeting is a trap. Patricia's going to claim Sarah mentally unstable, suffering from trauma-induced hysteria. She's already called Dr. Martin Reeves from the district psychological services. He's done evaluations before that declared victims unfit for work." "Then we don't go," Sarah said. "You have to go. If you don't, it confirms their narrative that you're unstable. But here's what Patricia doesn't know. Every word said in that meeting will be recorded. Not by us, by them." Nicole smiled for the first time. "Robert always runs a voice recorder during disciplinary meetings, claims it's for legal protection. Daniel always has the room's security camera feeding to his laptop. They think they're protecting themselves, but they're about to create evidence of conspiracy." The medical room suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Sarah could hear footsteps in the hallway, voices carrying through the thin walls. The school was a living organism, and news of the morning's incident was spreading through it like blood through veins. "We need a plan for the meeting," Becky said, already thinking ahead. "Sarah, you'll need to appear vulnerable but not broken. Let them think they're winning." "And you?" Sarah asked. "I'll insist on being present as medical support. Policy requires it if there's been a documented injury." Becky pulled out a thick manual from her desk. Page 437, subsection C. Patricia wrote these policies herself, never thinking they'd be used against her. Nicole checked her phone. 11:45 a.m. You have 2 hours to prepare. I need to get back before Patricia notices I'm gone. One more thing. James Porter's wife just filed for divorce. He's desperate to keep his job because of alimony. He might crack if pressured. She left as quietly as she'd arrived, leaving Sarah and Becky alone with the weight of what was coming. "Your cortisol test," Becky said suddenly, returning to her medical documentation. I need to draw blood now. If we can show a pattern of sustained stress hormone elevation, it's medical proof of ongoing harassment. As the needle slipped into Sarah's arm, she watched her blood fill the collection tube. Dark red, almost purple in the fluorescent light. Evidence of her humanity in a place that seemed to have forgotten what that meant. "Tell me about Robert's previous victims," Sarah said.
Maria Santos, February 2022. Grabbed her in the supply closet. She filed a complaint. Was gone by March. Jennifer Wu, September 2022.
He commented on her body daily until she recorded him. Then, Patricia had her arrested for illegal wiretapping. The charges were dropped, but Jennifer never came back. Ashley Coleman, yes, Richard's own daughter, January 2023. She reported that Robert followed her to her car every night for a week. Patricia convinced Richard it was a misunderstanding, and Ashley transferred to another school district. Each name was a weight, a ghost haunting the hallways of Adams County. And nobody did anything? The school board gets their metrics. Graduation rates are up. Federal funding keeps flowing. Patricia's brother-in-law runs the contracting company that renovates the buildings every summer with inflated budgets. Everyone who matters is getting paid. Becky labeled the blood tubes with precise handwriting, then locked them in a refrigerated container. But they made one mistake. They got greedy. $3.2 million is too much to hide, even with creative accounting. That's what triggered the federal investigation. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your performance this morning was convincing. Maintain cover. Help arriving soon. H, her handler." The message should have been reassuring, but something felt off. How did they know about this morning already? The incident had happened less than an hour ago. "Becky, how fast does FBI communication usually—" The fire alarm shrieked through the building, cutting off her words. Not the steady ring of a drill, but the urgent pulse of a real alarm. "That's not scheduled," Becky said, already grabbing the medical files and evidence bags, shoving them into a locked container. "We need to go." They joined the stream of students and staff evacuating the building. Sarah kept the emergency blanket wrapped around herself, hiding the torn skirt. In the parking lot, she spotted Robert with the other 4 men, huddled near Patricia's BMW. They were looking at something on Daniel's laptop, their expressions shifting from smug to concerned. "The videos," Nicole appeared beside them, speaking quietly. "Someone uploaded them to YouTube 12 minutes ago. They're already at 30,000 views." Sarah's story was about to go viral whether Patricia wanted it or not. The title of the video was simple but effective. 5 teachers assault colleague while principal watches. Patricia was on her phone, pacing, her face flushed with anger. Sarah could read her lips. "I don't care what it takes. Get them deleted. All of them." But the internet doesn't forget. And someone with the username Justice4Teachers had downloaded and re-uploaded the videos to multiple platforms, adding captions that identified each man by name and their role at the school. "Who did that?" Sarah asked. Nicole shrugged. "Could be any of the students, or someone else who's tired of watching this happen." The fire alarm finally stopped. An announcement crackled over the outdoor PA system. "False alarm! All staff and students may return to the building. The 2 p.m. staff meeting is still mandatory." As they walked back inside, Sarah noticed something different. Students were looking at her, really looking. Some with sympathy, others with a kind of awakening recognition. They'd seen the videos. They knew what had happened. In the hallway where it had all started, someone had already cleaned up. No trace of the morning's violence remained, except for a small tear in the bulletin board. where someone had grabbed it for support. Sarah touched the spot, feeling the rough edges of torn paper. 2 hours, Becky said quietly. 2 hours to prepare for war. They returned to the medical room to find it ransacked. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered. The locked cabinet where Becky had stored the evidence standing open with its lock, expertly picked.
"They took everything," Becky said, but she was smiling. "Good thing I already sent it to the FBI lab." She pulled up a shipping app on her phone, showing a package that had been picked up 40 minutes ago by a courier service. Chain of custody maintained. Evidence secured. "You knew they'd do this?" "Patricia always does this. Every time there's an incident, she has Richard do a security check
Of the medical room. Claims it's for drug inventory. Really, she's looking for evidence to destroy." Becky pulled a second key from her necklace and opened a hidden drawer built into the wall behind a medical poster. The real evidence never goes in the obvious place. Inside were duplicate photos, backup swabs, and a small digital recorder that had been running the entire morning. Admissible in court? Pennsylvania is a two-party consent state for recordings, Becky said. But there's an exception for documenting crimes in progress. Sexual assault qualifies. Sarah's watch showed 12:30 p.m. 90 minutes until the meeting. Her phone rang, a number she recognized as the school's main office. "Miss Mitchell, this is Dorothy from admin. Principal Henderson needs you to complete some paperwork before the meeting. Could you come to the office?" It was starting. The bureaucratic maze Patricia used to exhaust and confuse victims before the real confrontation. Sarah's skirt is torn 3 inches, but the real damage goes so much deeper. What would you do if this happened in your workplace? Would you report it, knowing your job was at risk? Or would you stay silent like the 3 women before Sarah? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. I want to know if you think Sarah should walk into that meeting or run. Because what happens next will determine not just her future, but the futures of every woman who walks these halls. The administrative office smelled like old coffee and copy toner. Dorothy, the secretary who'd been at Adams County for 15 years, handed Sarah a stack of forms without making eye contact. Incident report, workers' compensation claim, psychological evaluation consent, insurance waiver. Each form was designed to be confusing, contradictory, forcing Sarah to either admit fault or waive her rights. "I'll need time to read these properly," Sarah said. "The meeting's in 90 minutes. Principal Henderson needs them completed before then." Sarah sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair and began reading. The incident report wanted her to describe what happened, but limited her to 50 words. The workers' comp claim required her to admit the injury occurred due to her own negligence. The psychological evaluation consent gave the district the right to share her medical information with anyone they deemed necessary. She filled out none of them. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began typing an email to an address that looked like spam, but actually went directly to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She attached photos of each form, documenting Patricia's attempt to manipulate the paper trail. "Excuse me." A man's voice made her look up. Dr. Martin Reeves stood in the doorway, all concerned professionalism in his gray suit and sympathetic expression. "I'm here for your evaluation." "I haven't consented to an evaluation. Principal Henderson explained you've experienced a traumatic event. It's standard procedure to assess your fitness for work." He sat down across from her, pulling out a tablet. "Just a few questions. Have you been sleeping well?" Sarah recognized the trap. Any answer would be twisted. Say yes, and she's clearly in denial about trauma. Say no, and she's unstable. "I won't be answering questions without representation present." That seems unnecessarily adversarial. We're just trying to help. Then you won't mind if I record this conversation. Sarah placed her phone on the table, recorder app visible. Dr. Reeves's expression shifted. That won't be necessary. Perhaps we should wait until you're feeling more cooperative. He left, but Sarah knew he'd be at the meeting, ready to declare her unfit based on her refusal to cooperate with mental health services. 1:15 p.m. 45 minutes. Nicole walked past the office, catching Sarah's eye. She held up 3 fingers, then pointed down the hall. 3 minutes. Follow her. Sarah stood, leaving the blank forms on Dorothy's desk. I'll be back. She found Nicole in an empty classroom, along with someone unexpected, Jennifer Wu, the teacher who'd been arrested for recording Robert 2 years ago. I flew in from Seattle this morning, Jennifer said. When I saw the videos online, I knew it was time. Time for what? Jennifer pulled out a thick folder. Every woman Robert harassed, every complaint Patricia buried, every payoff from the discretionary fund. I've been collecting evidence for 3 years, working with 14 other victims. We were waiting for the right moment. And that's now? In 30 minutes, we're holding a press conference outside the main entrance. All 15 of us. Local news is already setting up. Patricia's about to walk into that meeting thinking she's controlling the narrative, but the story's already out of her hands. Sarah felt something she hadn't expected, hope, not just for justice, but for change. There's more, Nicole added. The FBI raid is scheduled for 4 p.m. They needed one more piece of evidence to execute the warrants. The DNA match from this morning's assault provided it. Robert Kane is confirmed as Michael Torres. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes, each one triggering the next. Patricia had built her empire on silence and fear, but she'd forgotten that secrets have a way of finding light. What do you need from me? Sarah asked. Survive the meeting, Jennifer said. Let them incriminate themselves. Every word they say will be used against them. And if they try to fire me? They can't. Not during an active federal investigation where you're a witness. Patricia knows that, but Robert doesn't. He'll push too hard, say too much. Men like him always do when they feel cornered. 1:30 p.m., 15 minutes. Sarah walked back through the hallways, past the spot where Robert had grabbed her that morning. Students were clustered in groups, phones out, discussing something in hushed tones. She caught fragments. Can't believe it. Happened right here. My sister warned me about him. The conference room was on the 2nd floor, windows overlooking the parking lot. Sarah could see news vans arriving, reporters she recognized from Channel 4 and Channel 7. Jennifer hadn't been exaggerating about the press conference. Patricia stood at the window, watching the media gather. Her hands were clenched behind her back, knuckles white. Unexpected guests, she said without turning. Someone's been busy. Robert was already seated at the conference table, along with the other 4 men. They'd changed clothes since the morning, trying to look more professional, less threatening. But Sarah could still see the scratches on Robert's arm where she'd defended herself. Miss Mitchell, Patricia turned, smile firmly in place. Thank you for joining us. Please sit. The chair they'd left for her was in the middle, surrounded. An intimidation tactic as old as time. Becky entered with her medical bag. I'm required to be present, given the documented injuries. This isn't a medical proceeding, Patricia said. Page 437, subsection C of your own policy manual says otherwise. Becky sat next to Sarah, opening her bag to reveal she was recording everything on a small device tucked between bandages. Dr. Reeves entered next, followed by Nicole. Then, unexpectedly, 3 members of the school board, people Patricia hadn't invited, judging by her expression. We saw the news vans, Board President Michael Harrison said. Thought we should understand what's happening at our school. Patricia's control was slipping. Sarah could see it in the way she gripped her pen, the tightness around her eyes. Just a misunderstanding that's been blown out of proportion, Patricia said. We're handling it internally. Internally? Harrison pulled out his phone, showing the YouTube video now at 200,000 views. This is beyond internal. 2 p.m. Patricia stood at the head of the table. Let's focus on why we're here. This morning, there was an incident involving Miss Mitchell and several staff members. We need to establish facts. The fact, Robert interrupted, is that she's been provocative since day one. That outfit was inappropriate. Sarah said nothing. Let him talk. She scratched me, Robert continued, showing his arm. That's assault. Self-defense, Becky corrected, in response to sexual battery. Nobody touched her inappropriately, James added quickly. We were just joking around. Joking? Board member Harrison asked. By lifting her skirt? She's exaggerating, Williams said. You know how women are, especially when they're trying to get attention. The board members exchanged glances. These men were burying themselves with every word. I have medical documentation of injuries, Becky said, pulling out photographs. Bruising consistent with grabbing. Scratches on her thighs from rings, torn clothing. Those could have happened anywhere, Daniel argued. She probably did it herself for sympathy. Through the window, Sarah could see the press conference beginning. 15 women standing together, Jennifer at the microphone. Even from here, she could see the crowd growing. Patricia noticed too. Her face had gone pale. Perhaps we should postpone this discussion, she said. No, Harrison replied. We're going to get to the bottom of this right now. Miss Mitchell, would you like to tell us what happened? Sarah stood slowly. She could feel every eye on her waiting for her to break or explode. Instead, she spoke with calm precision. At 8:45 this morning, Robert Kane lifted my skirt in the main hallway in front of approximately 23 witnesses. James Porter, William Cross, Daniel Shaw, and Richard Dunn surrounded me and laughed. When I tried to cover myself, Robert held my skirt up for approximately 12 seconds. The fabric tore. I scratched him in self-defense while trying to get away. Lies, Robert snarled. Complete fabrication. Then you won't mind if we review the security footage, Harrison said. Daniel's face went white. The cameras were malfunctioning this morning. All of them? Nicole asked innocently. That's odd. I have the backup feeds on my laptop. She opened her computer, and there it was. Multiple angles of the assault. The hallway camera showed Robert approaching Sarah. The stairwell camera caught the other men forming their circle. The exit camera showed students stopping to stare and record. This is, Patricia stammered. This footage shouldn't exist. Why? Harrison asked slowly. Did you order it deleted? The room erupted. Robert jumped to his feet, pointing at Sarah. She's a plant. She's been setting us up since she arrived. Sit down, Mr. Kane, Harrison commanded. Or should I say Mr. Torres? The room froze. Harrison pulled out a paper. We received this from the FBI 20 minutes ago. Confirmation that Robert Kane is actually Michael Torres, wanted for sexual assault in Philadelphia. Robert's face cycled through emotions, shock, rage, fear. You don't understand. Patricia said she'd protect me. She promised. Shut up, Patricia hissed. But it was too late. The dam had broken. She knew who I was, Robert continued, panic driving his words. She hired me anyway because I'd do the dirty work. Keep the female teachers in line. Make sure nobody looked too close at the books. What books? Harrison demanded. Sarah pulled out her phone and connected it to the room's display screen. Spreadsheets appeared, the real ones she'd been documenting for weeks. $3.2 million in federal training funds, she said, diverted through shell companies owned by these 5 men, authorized by Principal Henderson. The money was supposed to train unemployed workers. Instead, it bought Robert a new boat, James a vacation home, and funded Patricia's brother-in-law's construction company. The silence was deafening. Then, from outside, sirens. Multiple vehicles. FBI agents in tactical vests were surrounding the building. Patricia grabbed her purse, heading for the door, but Nicole stood in her way. Going somewhere? Move. I don't think so. Nicole pulled out a badge. FBI. Special Agent Nicole Bradley. You're under arrest for embezzlement of federal funds, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. The door burst open. Federal agents flooded in. Robert tried to run, but didn't make it 2 steps before he was on the ground, hands cuffed behind his back. "You said you'd protect us!" James shouted at Patricia as agents cuffed him too. "Everybody protect themselves," she replied coldly, even as an agent read her Miranda rights. One by one, they were led out. Robert Kane, the man who'd terrorized women for years. James, William, Daniel, Richard, each complicit in their own way. And Patricia Henderson, the architect of it all. The conference room, which had been meant to intimidate and silence Sarah, had become the site of their downfall. Before this explosive revelation shook the very foundation of Adams County, I need to ask you something. Those scratches on Sarah's arm weren't just self-defense. They were evidence collection. She knew exactly what she was doing when she fought back. Who do you think orchestrated this entire operation? Was it the FBI? Or was there someone else pulling the strings from even deeper in the shadows? Comment your theory now, because what happens in the next few hours will reveal a conspiracy that goes all the way to Washington. The real masterminds haven't even shown their faces yet. Board President Harrison sat heavily in his chair, looking at the empty room where 5 careers had just ended. "Miss Mitchell, or whoever you really are, how long has this investigation been going on?" 2 years at the federal level, Sarah replied. "I've been undercover for 3 months. And Becky? 18 months. She was placed here first to establish medical documentation patterns." Harrison rubbed his face. "We need to call an emergency board meeting. The entire administrative structure needs to be rebuilt." Outside, the press conference was in full swing. Sarah could see Jennifer at the microphone, surrounded by the other women Robert had harassed over the years. Their voices, silenced for so long, were finally being heard. "There's more," Nicole said, returning to the room after securing the suspects. "We have warrants for 17 more individuals connected to this network. 3 other schools, 2 training centers, and the regional education office." Patricia was just middle management. Sarah felt the weight of it. This morning, she'd been afraid of maintaining her cover for 3 more days. Now, the entire operation was blown wide open, and she wasn't sure if it was ending or just beginning. "Who's really in charge?" she asked Nicole. "Someone Patricia reported to, someone who's been siphoning federal education funds across 6 states. We have a name, just one, Marcus Webb. But he's a ghost. No photos, no official records. Patricia was supposed to meet him tonight." "Where?" "The warehouse district. Building 47, 10 p.m. Sarah looked at Becky, then at Nicole. They all understood what needed to happen. "I'll go in Patricia's place," Sarah said. "That's not your job anymore," Nicole replied. "Your cover's blown. Every criminal in the network knows who you are now. They know Sarah Mitchell, the mild-mannered accounting teacher. They don't know Sarah, the FBI analyst who's been tracking their money for 2 years. I can still do this." The sun was setting over Adams County Vocational Institute. In 12 hours, everything had changed. The hallway where Sarah had been assaulted was now a crime scene. The administrative offices were being searched by federal agents. Students and legitimate staff were being interviewed, their stories finally heard. But the job wasn't done. Sarah stood at the window, watching the last news van pack up. Tomorrow, this would be national news. The story of a school where corruption ran so deep that it took federal intervention to root it out. But tonight, there was still work to do. "Becky," she said, "I need you to analyze the DNA results when they come back. Not just for Robert's identification, but for any connections to other cold cases. If he's been using false identities, there might be more victims we don't know about." "Already on it. The lab promised preliminary results by 8 p.m. Nicole, can you access Patricia's communications? There must be some way she contacted this Marcus Webb." "Her phone's been seized, but I backed up her emails to a secure server weeks ago. I'll start searching." They worked in silence for an hour. 3 women who'd been strangers this morning, now bound by shared purpose. Outside, the school emptied. The parking lot, usually full until evening classes, was deserted except for FBI vehicles and crime scene tape. At 6 p.m., Nicole found something. Encrypted emails. Patricia used a cipher based on accounting codes. She thought she was being clever, but it's actually pretty basic. She pulled up the decoded messages. Marcus Webb isn't a person, it's a position, like a title that gets passed on. The current Marcus Webb took over 2 years ago. When the theft increased, Sarah noted, the previous embezzlement was small scale. Then suddenly, 3.2 million. "There's something else," Nicole continued. "Patricia wasn't supposed to meet Marcus Webb tonight. She was supposed to become Marcus Webb. It's a promotion ceremony of sorts. She was taking over the entire Eastern network, which meant whoever currently held the title would be there, the real architect of the crime." Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from her original FBI handler. "Abort mission. Too dangerous. Extraction team en route." She looked at Becky and Nicole. "They want to pull me out." "That's probably wise," Becky said. "But we'll lose him. Whoever Marcus Webb is, they'll disappear the moment they realize Patricia's been arrested." "Unless they don't realize," Nicole said slowly, "the arrest won't hit the news until the 11 p.m. broadcast. If we move now." It was a risk, but Sarah had been taking risks since she walked into Adams County 3 months ago. "I'm going to need Patricia's clothes," she said, "and her car. We have 4 hours to make me look like her." Becky shook her head. "This is insane. This morning, a man lifted my skirt in a hallway while others laughed," Sarah replied. "And he thought he could get away with it because he'd done it before. Because the system protected him. We have one chance to dismantle that system completely. I'm taking it." At 7 p.m. they transformed Sarah, Patricia's suit, retrieved from evidence, her jewelry, her perfume, even her distinctive red lipstick. From a distance, in the dark, she could pass. The DNA results came back at 8:15. Robert Kane was indeed Michael Torres. But more than that, his DNA matched 3 other unsolved assault cases across Pennsylvania and New Jersey. "He's been doing this for at least 8 years, Becky said, moving from school to school, protected by people like Patricia. 8:30 p.m. Sarah sat in Patricia's BMW, memorizing the route to the warehouse. Nicole would follow at a distance. Becky would coordinate with the FBI tactical team, keeping them close, but not too close. 9 p.m. Sarah drove through the gates of Adams County for what might be the last time. The school looked different in the dark. shadows pooling in corners where crimes had been hidden for years. 9:30 p.m. The warehouse district was a maze of identical buildings, abandoned except for a few illegal operations. Building 47 sat in the middle, unremarkable except for the 3 expensive cars parked outside. Sarah pulled Patricia's BMW into the last spot and waited. At exactly 10 p.m., a door opened. Light spilled out, and a figure appeared. Male, tall, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the industrial decay. "Patricia," he called, "you're punctual. I like that." Sarah stepped out of the car, keeping to the shadows, Patricia's heels clicking on broken asphalt. "Come," he said. "The others are waiting." Others, plural. This was bigger than they'd thought. Sarah followed him inside, her phone recording everything, GPS transmitting her location to Nicole and the tactical team. The warehouse was mostly empty, except for a conference table in the center, surrounded by 6 people she didn't recognize. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man announced, "Patricia Henderson, our new Eastern Regional Director." They applauded. Sarah forced herself to smile Patricia's cold smile. "Before we make it official," the man continued, "tell us about the situation at Adams County. We heard there was an incident this morning." This was the test. They knew something, but not everything. "A minor setback," Sarah said, pitching her voice lower to match Patricia's. "A new teacher got aggressive. Robert handled it poorly, but it's contained." "Contained how?" "She'll be gone by Monday. Psychological evaluation will declare her unfit. The usual process." The man nodded, satisfied. "Good. We can't afford attention right now. The federal audit is next month." Federal audit. They didn't know the FBI was already investigating. "Now," he continued, "let's discuss the expansion. With your promotion, Patricia, we're moving into 12 new schools. The federal infrastructure bill includes $15 billion for vocational training. We're positioned to redirect at least 1%. $150 million. The scale was staggering. Sarah's phone vibrated. A text from Nicole. "Tactical team in position. Signal when ready." But she needed more. Names, accounts, evidence. "I'll need access to the existing networks," Sarah said. "Of course." The man pulled out a laptop. "Everything's here. 23 schools, 47 shell companies, 93 participating administrators. You'll be managing it all." He turned the laptop toward her. The screen required a password. "Your birthday," he said. "Patricia's birthday. We've already programmed it in." Sarah's mind raced. She didn't know Patricia's birthday, but she did know Patricia's habit. She used the same password for everything. Her mother's maiden name plus her year of birth. Henderson, 1971. She typed it. The laptop unlocked. Files upon files appeared. The entire criminal network laid out in spreadsheets and contracts. Sarah clicked record on her phone, making sure to capture everything. "Impressive, isn't it?" the man said. 5 years of work. Completely invisible to federal oversight because we own the people doing the oversight." "Who's we?" Sarah asked. He smiled. "Does it matter? We're ghosts, Patricia. That's why this works. No real names, no permanent addresses, just money flowing from the government to us, and nobody notices because—" The door exploded inward. "FBI! Nobody move!" Tactical agents flooded the warehouse. The man reached for something in his jacket, but Sarah was faster, grabbing his wrist. "Special Agent Sarah Reynolds," she said, dropping the pretense. "You're under arrest." His face contorted with rage. "You're not Patricia." "No, Patricia's in federal custody, along with Robert Kane and the rest of your network at Adams County. The others tried to run, but there was nowhere to go." One by one, they were forced to the ground, handcuffed, read their rights. The man, the current Marcus Webb, laughed bitterly. "You have no idea how deep this goes." "Deep enough that you thought you were untouchable," Sarah replied. "But you made one mistake. You hurt people, and people remember. They document. They fight back." As the agents led him away, he turned back. "There are others. This is just one network. Then we'll find them too." The warehouse emptied except for Sarah, Nicole, and Becky, who'd arrived with the tactical team. They stood around the laptop, looking at the evidence that would dismantle a $150 million crime syndicate. "We did it," Becky said quietly. "The victims did it," Sarah corrected. "Jennifer and the 14 women who came forward. The students who recorded the assault. Everyone who refused to stay silent." They walked outside into the cool Pennsylvania night. The warehouse district was alive with federal vehicles, agents processing evidence, the machinery of justice finally turning. Sarah's phone rang. Board President Harrison. "Miss, Agent Reynolds, the emergency board meeting just concluded. We're appointing an interim administration, but we want you to know, if you wanted to stay on as a legitimate teacher, the position is yours." Sarah almost laughed. After everything, they were offering her the job she'd only pretended to want. "Thank you, but no. My work here is done." She ended the call and looked back at Adams County Vocational Institute in the distance. Tomorrow, it would begin the long process of healing. New leadership, new policies, new hope for students who deserved better. But tonight, Sarah had one more thing to do. 11 p.m. The FBI field office in Philadelphia hummed with activity. Sarah sat in a conference room, still wearing Patricia's suit, now wrinkled and smelling of warehouse dust. Across from her, Senior Special Agent David Harrison, no relation to the board president, reviewed the laptop's contents on a secure system. 93 administrators across 6 states, he said, shaking his head. "You've uncovered the largest education fraud scheme in U.S. history." "It's not uncovered yet," Sarah replied. "We have the mid-level players, but someone's controlling this from higher up. Marcus Webb was receiving orders from someone." Harrison pulled up a file. "The 7 people arrested at the warehouse are talking. They're terrified of someone they call the principal. Not a principal of a school, the principal. Apparently, this person has connections at the Department of Education itself." Sarah's exhaustion evaporated. "Federal level? Deputy secretary level at minimum. Someone who's been directing grant money to specific schools for years, knowing it would be stolen." The door opened. Nicole entered with Becky and someone unexpected, Jennifer Wu, still in the clothes she'd worn to the press conference. "I've been investigating this for 3 years," Jennifer said without preamble. "After Robert assaulted me and Patricia had me arrested, I started digging. I found patterns. Every school that received unusual federal grant increases had the same thing happen. Female teachers harassed into silence, male administrators suddenly wealthy, and one person at the district or state level protecting them." She placed a folder on the table. 27 schools. All received grants from the same federal program. All had harassment complaints that disappeared. All had a Patricia Henderson, someone smart enough to run the scheme, but not powerful enough to have created it. Harrison studied the documents. "This is solid pattern analysis, but we need a name. Who's the principal?" "I might have that," Nicole said, pulling out Patricia's phone. "She made one call after the incident this morning, to a blocked number, but I traced the signal path." She showed them a map with cell tower triangulation. "The call went to Washington, D.C., specifically to an office building 3 blocks from the Department of Education. "That's not enough for a warrant," Harrison said. "No, but this might be." Becky opened her medical bag and pulled out a sealed evidence container. "Remember when Patricia grabbed Sarah's arm during their first meeting 3 months ago? Left bruises? I took photographs and samples. But I also noticed something else. Patricia had fresh scratches on her hand. She said it was from her cat, but the pattern was wrong. Too deep, too linear. So I collected DNA from under Sarah's fingernails after that meeting too. Sarah had instinctively scratched back when Patricia grabbed her. The DNA under Sarah's nails didn't match Patricia." Sarah leaned forward. "What?" "Someone else was in that room. Someone who grabbed you at the same time Patricia did. Someone you scratched in self-defense. The DNA belongs to a male, approximately 50 to 60 years old. I ran it through CODIS but got no matches. However, I did get a familial match." She pulled up a record. "The DNA is related to someone in the system. Margaret Wilson, Patricia's supposed boss on the school board." "Margaret Wilson has a brother," Nicole said, typing rapidly. "Dr. Jonathan Wilson, Deputy Secretary of Vocational Education at the Department of Education." The room went silent. "He oversees all federal vocational training grants," Harrison said slowly. "He literally controls where the money goes. And his sister Margaret sits on multiple school boards across Pennsylvania," Jennifer added. "She recommends which schools get grant applications approved." "It's a family business," Sarah said. "Jonathan directs federal money to schools where Margaret has influence. They install people like Patricia to manage the theft, and men like Robert to ensure silence through fear." Harrison stood. "I need to make some calls. This just became a matter for the Inspector General's office. Nobody leaves this building until I get back." 2 hours passed. Sarah dozed in her chair, adrenaline finally giving way to exhaustion. She dreamed of hallways and torn fabric, and the sound of laughter that wasn't funny at all. Nicole woke her at 2 a.m. "Harrison's back, with company." The conference room was now full. FBI Director himself, via secure video link, the Inspector General of the Department of Education, U.S. attorneys from 3 different districts, and Margaret Wilson herself, brought in for questioning but not yet arrested. Margaret sat with perfect posture, gray hair immaculate despite the late hour. "I don't understand why I'm here." "Your brother is Jonathan Wilson," the Inspector General stated. "Yes. You serve on 7 school boards across 3 states. Public service is important to me. Every school where you serve received exceptional federal grant funding in the last 5 years. They're good schools with strong applications." Sarah watched Margaret's hands, steady, no nervousness. Either she was innocent or an exceptional liar. "Mrs. Wilson," Sarah said, "where were you this morning at 80:45? "At Adams County, actually. I arrived early for an observation." "Did you witness the assault?" Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "I saw the aftermath. Shameful behavior by those men." "You didn't try to stop it?" "I wasn't in the hallway when it happened. I was in Patricia's office, reviewing financial documents." Sarah pulled up security footage on her laptop. "This is from Patricia's office at 8:43 a.m. The room watched as Patricia entered her office, followed by Margaret. They spoke briefly, then Patricia left. Margaret remained, going through files. At 8:45, she looked at her phone, frowned, and hurried out. "You received a text," Sarah said. "What did it say?" "I don't recall." Nicole pulled up phone records. The text was from Robert Kane. It said, "Situation in main hallway. New teacher problem." "So you knew something was happening?" Sarah pressed. "I thought it was a disciplinary issue." "You thought Robert Kane, whom you've known for 3 years, was handling a disciplinary issue in the hallway instead of an office?" Margaret said nothing. "Mrs. Wilson," the Inspector General said, "we have evidence of systematic fraud involving federal education funds. Your brother is implicated. You're on the boards of every affected school. You can cooperate, or you can be charged as a co-conspirator." For the first time, Margaret showed fear. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right. But lawyers won't change the evidence." Harrison placed a document in front of her. "This is an email from your personal account to Patricia Henderson, dated 2 years ago. You're instructing her to hire someone named Michael Torres, despite his background check showing irregularities. You knew Robert Kane was Michael Torres." Margaret's hands trembled. "Jonathan said he needed people who could maintain order. Strong men who wouldn't be questioned. Your brother told you to hire a sexual predator? He said Michael had skills we needed, that he'd been wrongly accused before. And you believed that?" "I believed my brother." The story unfolded over the next 3 hours. Margaret, desperate to please her successful brother. Jonathan, using his position to enrich himself and his sister through elaborate fraud schemes. Patricia and dozens like her, given power in exchange for managing the theft. And men like Robert, given protection in exchange for maintaining fear. "How much money total?" the Inspector General asked. "Over 5 years? Close to $500 million, Harrison replied, "spread across enough schools and states to avoid detection." Until Agent Reynolds found the pattern. At 5 a.m., as dawn broke over Philadelphia, arrest warrants were issued for Dr. Jonathan Wilson and 17 others at the federal and state level. The corruption reached higher than anyone had imagined, but the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah finally changed out of Patricia's suit back into her own clothes. They felt like armor, like returning to herself after months of pretense. Her phone rang. It was Michael Harrison, the board president at Adams County. "Agent Reynolds, I apologize for calling so early, but we have a situation. Despite the arrests yesterday, Robert Kane's supporters are planning a protest. They're claiming he was set up, that the assault was staged. They're demanding the board reinstate him and the others." Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity. "How many supporters?" "About 30. Mostly family members, and a few students they've convinced. They're gathering at the school at 7 a.m. Let them gather. In fact, encourage it. Make sure the media knows." "Are you sure?" "Very sure. I'll be there at 7. She looked at Nicole and Becky. "Want to attend a protest?" They arrived at Adams County to find a small crowd with hastily made signs. "Kane was framed. Stop the witch hunt. Real men are under attack." But they were outnumbered 5-1 by a counter-protest. The 15 women from yesterday's press conference, dozens of female students and staff. Male teachers who'd stayed silent too long. Parents who'd heard the stories. Community members who were tired of secrets. Jennifer Wu stood at the front with a megaphone. For 3 years, this school protected predators and punished victims. No more. The Kane supporters tried to shout her down, but their voices were drowned out by chants of justice for victims and safety for all. Then the buses arrived. 3 of them chartered from surrounding counties. Women and men who'd been victimized at other schools in the network. Over 100 people, all wearing purple ribbons, the color chosen to represent survival. Board President Harrison had set up a microphone on the school's front steps. "We're holding a public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak about their experiences at Adams County may do so." For the next 4 hours, people spoke. Former students described being cornered by Robert Kane. Female teachers detailed years of harassment. Male teachers admitted they'd been too afraid to speak up. Parents revealed complaints that had been ignored. Maria Santos, one of Robert's victims from 2 years ago, stood at the microphone with quiet dignity. Robert Kane lifted my skirt in the supply closet. When I reported it, Patricia Henderson said I was confused, that I'd misunderstood his intentions. She made me sign a document saying I wouldn't discuss it or I'd lose my job. I signed because I have 3 kids to feed. But I photographed that document, and I've been waiting for this day. She held up the paper. This is Patricia's signature, threatening me if I spoke about being sexually assaulted. This is the culture she created. Ashley Coleman, Richard Dunn's own daughter, took the microphone next. My father watched Robert Kane harass me and did nothing because Patricia controlled his job. He chose his paycheck over his daughter. That's what this place does to people. It makes them complicit in their own destruction. By noon, the Kane supporters had dwindled to 5 people: his mother, his brother, and 3 men who'd benefited from the same system. They stood isolated, surrounded by hundreds demanding change. Then Sarah took the microphone. My name is Special Agent Sarah Reynolds. For 3 months, I've walked these halls as Sarah Mitchell, documenting crimes that everyone knew about, but no one could prove. Yesterday, 5 men thought they could assault me without consequences, just as they'd done to others before. They were wrong. She pulled out her phone and connected it to the portable speakers Harrison had set up. This is a recording from the 2 p.m. meeting yesterday, after the assault. Robert's voice echoed across the crowd. She's exaggerating. You know how women are. Then James. Nobody touched her inappropriately. William. She probably did it herself for sympathy. Daniel. The cameras were malfunctioning. Richard. She's mentally unstable. The crowd listened in disgusted silence as the 5 men systematically tried to destroy Sarah's credibility, not knowing they were being recorded. Then Patricia's voice. We'll handle this internally. No need for outside involvement. And finally, Robert's panicked confession. Patricia said she'd protect me. She promised. She knew who I was. Sarah stopped the recording. These men didn't just assault me. They assaulted Maria Santos, Jennifer Wu, Ashley Coleman, and at least 11 others we've documented. They thought they were untouchable because Patricia Henderson and Margaret Wilson protected them. Because Jonathan Wilson at the Department of Education made sure the money kept flowing as long as everyone stayed quiet. She looked directly at the 5 remaining Kane supporters. Your son, your brother, your friend. He's not a victim. He's a predator who's been protected by corrupt money and systemic fear. And that protection ends today. A news crew pushed forward. Agent Reynolds, what happens to the school now? It gets rebuilt. New administration, new policies, new culture. The FBI will monitor the transition, but the real change has to come from this community, from the people brave enough to speak truth after years of silence. The crowd began to disperse, but Margaret Wilson emerged from a car flanked by FBI agents. She'd been released on bail but was required to appear at the school board emergency meeting. She walked up to Sarah. You destroyed my family. No, Sarah replied. Your family destroyed itself through greed and cruelty. I just turned on the lights. 3 p.m. The school board meeting was standing room only. The 5 board members who hadn't been arrested sat at the front, facing a crowd of hundreds. The 5 arrested men were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits and shackles. Robert Kane, James Porter, William Cross, Daniel Shaw, and Richard Dunn. They would hear their fate before being returned to federal custody. Board President Harrison called the meeting to order. We're here to make immediate decisions about the future of Adams County Vocational Institute. But first, these 5 former employees have requested to address the board. Robert was brought forward first. The man who'd terrorized women for years looked smaller somehow, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the weight of consequences. "I want to apologize," he began, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I want to apologize to Sarah, Agent Reynolds, to Maria, to Jennifer, to Ashley, to everyone I hurt." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Too late!" Robert continued, his voice breaking. "I know it's too late, but I need them to know. Patricia told me I was untouchable, that as long as I kept people in line, I could do whatever I wanted. I chose to believe her because it let me be the monster I already was." He was led back to his seat, shoulders shaking. James Porter was next. "My wife left me because she knew what I was. My daughters won't speak to me. I stood there and laughed while Robert hurt people because I was too much of a coward to stop him. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just sorry." William Cross could barely speak through his tears. 27 years of teaching, and I threw it all away to be part of their club, to feel powerful. I watched good teachers leave because of us. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I'm guilty of everything they say. Daniel Shaw took the microphone with shaking hands. "I deleted evidence. I helped cover up assaults. I thought I was smart, using technology to protect criminals. My mother was a teacher. She'd be ashamed of what I became." Richard Dunn was last. He looked at his daughter Ashley in the crowd. "I failed you. I failed as a father, as security, as a man. I was supposed to protect people, and instead, I protected the ones hurting them. Ashley, I don't expect you to forgive me. Just know that I know what I did was unforgivable." Then something unexpected happened. All 5 men got on their knees in front of the crowd, not orchestrated, not planned. One by one, they knelt. "Please," Robert said, and for the first time, his arrogance was completely gone. "We're begging you, not for mercy we don't deserve, but to use our example. Don't let this happen again. Don't let another school become what we made this one." The crowd was silent. Some cried, others looked away. The victims had varied expressions, some satisfied, others still angry, a few almost pitying. Sarah stood. "You knelt too late. You beg after being caught, not after conscience. But you're right about one thing. You are an example. An example of what happens when corrupt power meets federal justice." The 5 men were led away, back to custody to await sentences that would likely keep them in prison for years. Board President Harrison addressed the crowd. "The board has voted unanimously. Adams County Vocational Institute will undergo complete administrative restructuring. We're requesting federal oversight for the next 2 years. All policies regarding harassment, reporting, and financial management will be rewritten with input from victims and experts. And we're appointing a new interim director." He looked at Sarah. "Agent Reynolds, would you consider staying to help rebuild what was broken?" "I'm a federal agent, not an educator. But you understand what needs to be fixed." Sarah thought about it. 3 months of pretending to be a teacher. Weeks of documenting crimes while maintaining cover. Days of fear that she'd be discovered. But also moments when students had genuinely learned from her accounting lessons, when she'd helped someone understand a concept they'd struggled with. "No," she said finally. "But I recommend Rebecca Thompson as interim director. She's been here 18 months, documenting everything, protecting victims when she could. She knows this school's wounds and how to heal them. Becky stood, surprised. I'm just a nurse. You're a forensic nurse who gathered evidence that will convict criminals. You're exactly who this school needs. The board voted. Unanimous. Becky Thompson, interim director. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. New policies were drafted. Committees were formed. A fund was established for victims' counseling. The state agreed to provide emergency funding to replace the stolen federal money. As the sun set over Adams County, the last of the crowd dispersed. Sarah, Nicole, and Becky stood in the empty parking lot where it had all exploded 24 hours ago. What happens now? Becky asked. Now we testify at trials. We ensure convictions. We help other schools identify similar corruption. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing them an email. The Attorney General wants to create a task force. Every school that received unusual federal grants in the last 5 years will be audited. We estimate we'll find at least 50 more cases. 50 more Patricia Hendersons, Nicole said quietly. And 50 more Roberts hiding behind them, Becky added. They stood in silence, watching the school that would never be the same. Jennifer Wu approached them. Thank you, all of you. For 3 years, I thought I was crazy, that I was the only one who saw the pattern. You proved I was right. You proved yourself right, Sarah replied. You never stopped fighting. What will you do now? Jennifer asked. There's a school in Ohio showing similar patterns. Missing money, harassment complaints disappearing, a principal no one questions. I leave tomorrow. Another undercover assignment? That's what I do. I become someone else to expose people hiding who they really are. As they talked, a car pulled up. Dr. Jonathan Wilson, the real architect of the corruption, had been arrested at his home in Washington that afternoon. The news played on Jennifer's phone. Footage of him being led away in handcuffs, reporters shouting questions, his career destroyed in minutes. $500 million, Nicole said. How did he think he'd get away with it? Because he had for 5 years, Sarah replied. Because every Patricia protected him. Every Robert scared people into silence. Every Margaret made it look legitimate. It was a perfect system until it wasn't. What made it imperfect? Becky asked. Sarah thought about that morning, about Robert's hand on her skirt, about the fabric tearing. Hubris. They got so comfortable in their power that they stopped being careful. Robert assaulted me in a crowded hallway because he'd done it before without consequences. Patricia called a meeting to intimidate me because it had always worked. They followed their pattern, not realizing the pattern was evidence. Her phone rang. FBI director calling personally. Agent Reynolds, outstanding work. The president's being briefed on the education fraud network. You're being awarded the Director's Award for Excellence. There's a ceremony next week. I'll be in Ohio next week. The ceremony can wait. The work can't. I understand. Reynolds, what you've uncovered will change how federal education grants are monitored forever. You've saved taxpayers hundreds of millions and protected countless victims. After the call, Sarah looked at the 3 women who'd become her unexpected partners. You know what the real victory is? It's not the arrests or the money recovered. It's that tomorrow, a female teacher will walk down that hallway without fear. A student will report harassment, knowing they'll be believed. Someone will question irregular finances without risking their job. The school's lights were coming on for evening classes, the ones that hadn't been canceled. Life continuing, differently, but continuing. I should go, Sarah said. Early flight tomorrow. Will we see you again? Becky asked. Probably not, Sarah Mitchell doesn't exist anymore. Agent Reynolds has to become someone else now. As she walked to her car, students were arriving for evening welding class. They looked at the building differently now, some with suspicion, others with hope. Change was uncomfortable, but necessary. Sarah drove through the gates one last time. In her rearview mirror, Adams County Vocational Institute grew smaller, but its impact would follow her forever. Every school she investigated from now on, she'd remember the sound of tearing fabric and the silence that followed. She'd remember the women who stood together after years of isolation. She'd remember 5 men on their knees, begging for mercy they'd never shown others. 2 weeks later, from a small apartment in Columbus, Ohio, Sarah watched the news coverage of the trials beginning. Robert Kane, pleading guilty to avoid a longer sentence. Patricia Henderson, fighting charges but losing. Margaret Wilson, turning state's evidence against her brother. Jonathan Wilson, facing life in federal prison. But the real news was from Adams County itself. Enrollment was up. More female students were applying, knowing it was now safe. The new policies were being adopted by schools across Pennsylvania as a model. Becky had hired 3 new counselors specializing in trauma. Nicole had returned to the FBI, promoted for her undercover work. The 15 women who'd stood together at the press conference had formed a nonprofit, Voices After Silence. They were visiting schools, teaching administrators how to recognize and prevent harassment. Jennifer Wu was writing a book about institutional corruption and the courage to expose it. Sarah's new assignment was beginning. Another school, another identity, another network of corruption to unravel. She'd cut and dyed her hair, changed her mannerisms, became Emma Rodriguez, a shy Spanish teacher from Arizona. The cycle beginning again. But she kept one thing from Adams County, a small piece of torn fabric from the skirt, sealed in an evidence bag. A reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of violence reveal the largest systems of corruption. That a man who thinks he can lift a woman's skirt with impunity might be protecting millions in stolen money. That silence is expensive, but truth has its own economy. On her first day at the Ohio school, Sarah noticed things. The male athletic director who stood too close to female staff. The principal who held closed-door budget meetings. The female teachers who walked in groups, never alone. The patterns were there, waiting to be documented. She thought of Robert Kane in federal prison, probably still wondering how his perfect protection had failed. He'd believed Patricia's promises, Margaret's influence, Jonathan's power. He'd believed he was untouchable. Sarah smiled grimly as she walked into her new classroom. They always believed they were untouchable, until they weren't. The FBI task force Sarah's investigation had spawned had a name now: Operation Schoolyard. In 6 months, they'd identified 43 schools with similar patterns. 17 arrests had been made. $90 million had been recovered. But more importantly, cultures were changing. Schools were implementing the Adams County protocols, mandatory reporting, independent financial audits, anonymous tip lines that bypassed local administration. The Department of Education had restructured its grant approval process, removing the ability for a single person like Jonathan Wilson to direct funds. But the biggest change was harder to measure. It was in the way female teachers walked with more confidence, the way students felt empowered to speak up, the way good administrators felt supported in standing against corruption. Maria Santos, Robert's victim from 2 years ago, had returned to teaching. She sent Sarah an email. "I walk down that hallway every day now, the same hallway where he cornered me. But it's not his anymore. It's mine." Ashley Coleman had started law school, planning to become a prosecutor specializing in institutional abuse cases. "My father chose wrong," she'd written in her application essay. "I choose justice." The 5 men who'd knelt and begged were serving their sentences. Robert Kane got 12 years for sexual assault and conspiracy. James Porter, 8 years. William Cross, 7 years. Daniel Shaw, 10 years for destroying evidence. Richard Dunn, 5 years. But he'd be on lifetime probation, never allowed to work security again. Patricia Henderson was fighting her charges through 3 different lawyers, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her trial was set for spring, and prosecutors were confident of conviction. Margaret Wilson had pled guilty in exchange for testifying against her brother. She'd served 2 years minimum security, losing her fortune but avoiding a longer sentence. Dr. Jonathan Wilson's trial was the biggest. Federal corruption, wire fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. The Attorney General was personally overseeing the prosecution. He faced 40 years if convicted on all counts. But for Sarah, now Emma Rodriguez in Ohio, those were just updates on a screen. Her focus was forward, on the new patterns emerging in her current school. The music teacher who kept failing female students who rejected his advances. The vice principal skimming from the activities fund. The board member whose construction company always won school contracts. It would take months to build the case. Months of pretending, documenting, waiting for the right moment. But she'd learned patience at Adams County. She'd learned that justice could wear many faces. A shy teacher, a dedicated nurse, a concerned administrator. That truth could hide in plain sight until the moment it exploded into undeniable reality. 6 months into the Ohio investigation, Sarah received an unexpected call. Becky Thompson, still running Adams County, now permanently appointed as director. "Sarah, I know you're probably someone else now, but I had to tell you, we had our first year without a single harassment complaint. Not because people aren't reporting, they are about old incidents, but no new ones. The culture actually changed." "That's why we do this," Sarah replied. "There's something else. Robert Kane wants to testify from prison. He says there are more schools, more networks. He wants to cooperate in exchange for a transfer to a facility closer to his mother." Sarah considered this. "He knows things?" "He says Patricia reported to others besides Jonathan Wilson. That there's a Western network, Southern network. That Adams County was just one tentacle. The investigation was expanding again. What had started as $3.2 million in missing funds at one school was becoming a map of corruption across American education. Each thread pulled revealed 10 more. "I'll pass it along," Sarah said. "Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Sarah. Or whoever you are now. You saved our school." "No, the people who spoke up saved it. I just gave them a voice." After the call, Sarah sat in her empty apartment in Columbus, looking at the evidence she'd gathered so far. Financial documents, recorded conversations, photographs of injuries no one had reported. Another school infected by the same disease of corruption and fear. But she also had something else now, knowledge that change was possible. That a school like Adams County could transform from a place of fear to one of safety. That 5 men who'd terrorized others could end up on their knees begging for mercy they'd never shown. That a principal could fall and a nurse could rise to replace her. The torn fabric from her skirt was framed now, hanging on her apartment wall where only she could see it. Some might think it strange to keep a reminder of assault, but for Sarah, it represented more. It was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled $500 million in fraud. It was the evidence that even the smallest acts of violence leave traces. It was proof that power assumed isn't power guaranteed. As night fell over Columbus, Sarah prepared for another day as Emma Rodriguez. Another day of watching, documenting, waiting. The athletic director had grabbed another teacher yesterday, just a hand on her lower back. But Sarah had seen the fear in the woman's eyes. The pattern was beginning. Soon, she'd have enough evidence. Soon, another network would fall. Soon, more people would be free from fear. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Adams County Vocational Institute was thriving under Becky's leadership. Enrollment had reached record highs. The Federal Monitor had reported it as a model of institutional reform. The school that had been synonymous with corruption was becoming synonymous with redemption. The 5 men who'd mocked her in that hallway had begged for mercy. Patricia Henderson, who'd protected predators, was heading to prison. Margaret Wilson had lost everything she'd built on corruption. Jonathan Wilson would likely die in federal custody. And Sarah Reynolds would keep doing what she did best, becoming someone else to expose those who hid behind false faces. The work would never be finished. There would always be another school, another network, another group of predators protected by power and money. But each victory made the next one more possible. Each time truth won, lies became harder to maintain. Her phone buzzed with a text from her handler. New intel. The Ohio network is bigger than we thought, requesting additional resources. You're not alone. Sarah smiled. She never had been. Behind her were Becky and Nicole and Jennifer, the 15 women who'd stood together, the hundreds who'd testified, the thousands who'd watched justice arrive, late but certain. Tomorrow, Emma Rodriguez would teach Spanish to unsuspecting students while documenting crimes they couldn't imagine happening in their school. But Agent Sarah Reynolds would be counting evidence, building cases, waiting for the moment when another hallway would become a crime scene and another network would crumble. The torn fabric caught the light from the street lamp outside. A small flag of victory in a war that wasn't over, but was finally being fought. Justice had worn many faces at Adams County. It had been a shy teacher letting herself be assaulted to gather evidence. A nurse collecting DNA with methodical precision. An administrator secretly recording her corrupt boss. Students with phone cameras refusing to let assault go undocumented. Women standing together after years of isolation. Even 5 criminals finally understanding the weight of their crimes. But mostly, justice had been patient. It had waited through 3 years of Jennifer Wu's investigation, 18 months of Becky's documentation, 3 months of Sarah's undercover work. It had built its case, one piece of evidence at a time, until the wait was undeniable. As Sarah Reynolds closed her eyes in Columbus, she knew that somewhere, Robert Kane was lying in a federal prison cell, perhaps finally understanding that his power had always been an illusion, that Patricia Henderson was reading through thousands of pages of evidence against her, seeing how thoroughly her empire had been documented, that Jonathan Wilson was learning what it meant to be truly powerless. And somewhere, in a hallway in Adams County Vocational Institute, a female teacher was walking alone, unafraid, her skirt whatever length she chose, her dignity intact, her safety guaranteed. That was victory. That was justice. That was why Sarah Reynolds would wake up tomorrow as Emma Rodriguez and continue the work. Because in the end, the 5 men who'd mocked a shy teacher in a hallway hadn't just begged for mercy. They'd proven that no corruption is too entrenched to expose, no predator too protected to prosecute, no system too powerful to reform. The torn fabric fluttered in the breeze from the air conditioner.
A battle flag in a war that would continue tomorrow, next month, next year. But tonight, victory was enough. Tonight, justice was enough. Tonight, the truth was enough.
You are not alone. Someone wants to hear you. Share your story. Thank you for watching to the end. Please like and subscribe to Stereo.